Hello and welcome to Breaking Bread with Rivaaj Maharaj, where nothing is off the table. For today's episode, I wanted to talk about the rift between Iran's president and the Guards chief over the war economy. So, without further ado, let's get into it. There's an article in Iran International. Rift deepens between Iran's president and Guards chief over war economy. The article goes on. Serious disagreements have emerged between Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian and IRGC Chief Commander Ahmad Vahidi over how to manage the war and its damaging impact on people's livelihoods and the economy, sources with knowledge of the matter told Iran International. Pezeshkian has criticized the approach of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps regarding escalating tensions and continuing attacks on neighboring countries, warning about the economic consequences of the situation, according to the sources who spoke on condition of anonymity. Now, if you recall, in one of the videos I did fairly recently, I mentioned this. And throughout this Iran conflict, I've also highlighted this. The indiscriminate shelling of Iran's neighboring countries, that is the Gulf countries, by the IRGC. Number one, it showed a lack of a plan. and it was subsequently found out that in the absence of the Ayatollah Khamenei, that means in the event of his death by way of an attack, then these units were all to operate autonomously. Now, this coincides with the manner in which they are striking these Gulf nations. Because for me, the consequences of this behavior are, number one, it shows a very erratic behavior. It shows a group that is not in control. It is just lashing out indiscriminately. It has no end game in sight. The priority is to save the regime at any cost, and this is what it is doing. So the political outcomes of these actions are non-existent. And the second thing is that by the regime behaving in this manner, and by it, for example, targeting ships going through the Straits of Hormuz, it tends to alienate itself. That is, that the regime then tends to alienate itself from any possible sympathy that it would receive from the wider world at large. So countries that are not involved in this conflict but are being adversely affected by it, 9 out of 10 times will probably say, yes, Donald Trump shouldn't have done what he did, the Israelis shouldn't have done what he did. However, we're not involved. So why are our ships and our resources being targeted by the IRGC? And that risks Iran becoming a pariah on the world stage. Again, harking back to my point that political consequences are not taken into account. These are military decisions taken by military commanders who are let out into the wild. They're let on the loose. They're now making decisions autonomously. And this is where the danger comes in, because you're now creating a free-for-all scenario. Reining these alpha males in, reining these commanders in later on to pledge allegiance to a leader is going to be difficult, because you have egos that are at stake. And these egos are going to be pitted against each other for control. You must remember, in the absence of leadership, that is, in the absence of Ayatollah Khamenei, there is a power vacuum. And now anybody and everybody with the slightest iota of a chance at becoming a leader within Iran is going to try and usurp that position. You're going to have a warlord type scenario where you're going to have factions formed. I keep saying this. You're going to have a scenario where these warring factions cannot be reined in, because they're so used, the longer the war draws on, they become used to making decisions on their own, and then having to go back to taking instructions from somebody other than someone that it is to who they pledge their allegiance and respect. And to find that person in this current climate is virtually non-existent, because that is built up over a period of time. So you're going to find a situation where you're going to have these factions being formed, alliances being formed, and you're going to find a lot of discontentment between these commanders. So you're going to find instances where they're going to pick up arms against each other in the absence of the United States or Israel. And this is going to play into the hands of the United States and the Israelis, because they can then pit one faction against the other and let them do the dirty work for them. Now, the article further goes on to say, on March 7, Pezeshkian, in a video message, apologized for what he called fire at will attacks by countries' armed forces on neighboring countries, and instructed them to stop such attacks. However, the attacks continued shortly after the release of this message. Again, Pezeshkian is a diplomat. He's looking at the political ramifications from this, because he knows that this war will never be unending. At some point, whether it's today, tomorrow, 10 years, 20 years, 50 years from today, there is going to be a need for a political solution. And when that day arrives, it is going to be far more difficult because of the military action that is being taken. You see, there is no nexus between the political leadership and the military leadership. The military leadership are acting with impunity, and from the manner in which they're acting, these commanders are devoid of any political acumen. They're just military people out there to perform a duty. They're much like mercenaries. They have no concern for their actions politically. They're there to do a job, and that is it. The political ramifications, somebody else has to bother about. The problem is, their military actions are going to hamper severely any political maneuvering that Iran is going to need to do in the future. Because no man is an island. At some point, Iran is going to need to make friends on the world stage. And the longer it decapitates independent nation states that are not involved in this conflict, the longer it decapitates their energy supply, their trade, the longer it targets infrastructure of its neighbors, the greater of a pariah it becomes. And coming back from that politically is a Herculean task. It's going to need appeasement on unrivaled scales. Now, what Pezeshkian is trying to tell these morons is, by you behaving this way, by you attacking indiscriminately, you are making the job later on down the road that much more difficult. There is no method to the madness. You are looking to just achieve an aim. And from the military's perspective, I can understand. These leaders, you got to remember, for 47 years, they have brutally massacred their own people. Do you know what will happen to them if this regime has to collapse? And if Iran descends into civil war, these will be the first people that will be hunted down and beaten to death because of the pain and suffering they have inflicted on their own people. So for them, it's an existential fight. They are in the least bit concerned about political ramifications at this point in time. This is something that involves their very survival, because should their infrastructure, should their base collapse around them, their foundations collapse around them, then they are on their way to meet their maker, because the Iranian populace will not spare them. They will be massacred. So Pezeshkian, while trying to secure some semblance of a decent future for the Iranians, these IRGC leaders are not going to allow it. And the fact that they continue to do as they please already goes to prove my point that they are acting autonomously, and that it is going to be difficult to rein them in later, because now they're not taking instruction from the president. They have no allegiance to this man. In fact, I've said before, he is the equivalent of Reza Pahlavi, because he just doesn't have anything within him. If anything, it will probably be Abbas Arachi. But even he is going to struggle to rein in these commanders, because these men are fighting for their very survival. So the article goes on further. Informed sources told Iran International that Pezeshkian has called for executive and managerial powers to be returned to the administration, a demand that has been firmly rejected by Vahidi. In response to criticism, the IRGC commander blamed the current situation on the government's failure to implement structural reforms before the conflict began, and the sources said. In recent days, Israeli media have also reported signs of divisions within Iran's ruling system. The Times of Israel, citing a senior Israeli official, wrote, "There are signs of cracks in the Iranian regime. We are now creating conditions for its overthrow, but ultimately everything depends on the Iranian people." The Israeli outlet Ynet also reported similar internal divisions earlier this month. Now, the IRGC commander blaming the bureaucracy for not having implemented change earlier on. Now, this is akin to a dog trying to catch its tail, because this bureaucracy was unable to implement change simply because of the brutal manner in which the IRGC and the Basij managed the day-to-day affairs of Iran. Couple that with Ayatollah Khamenei, who was so paranoid and didn't want to relinquish control or ease up. The thing was that when the protests originally began, the government should have at least come in with some concessions. And this is where the problem comes in. They're now going to be entangled in a blame game. However, the IRGC are going to continue to retreat to their number one posturing, which is brutal force, suppression of the people, suppression of the activities of the people in order to maintain control. And that can only last for a certain amount of time. With the bombardment that they are facing, with the heavy strikes by the Israelis and the Americans, with the decapitation of their leaders, they are being decimated on a, not even a daily basis, on an hourly basis. Soon there's going to be nobody to replace anybody. Soon there's going to be nobody wanting to take a job because the Israelis are knocking them out before they can even spend a day in power. So the positions are going to become vacant, or you're going to fill them with imbeciles. You're going to fill them with people that are not capable of maintaining control. And this is where it is going to descend into madness, because the Iranian people are at some point going to either step in, or you're going to have foreign intervention come in. Because as the regime weakens, Pakistan, Iraq, Turkey, the Gulf states, Israel, the United States, Syria, they're all going to be sitting there and trying to get their proxies in so that they get a beneficial outcome from what is going to happen in Iran. It's only a matter of time. It's only a matter of time before some semblance of a change in this regime is going to take place, if not the full capitulation, because they are being decimated. And then the rift is kicking in from within. And once that rift kicks in, the Israelis and the Americans are going to exploit it. Their bombing and their decapitation strikes has now resulted in this fertile ground for dissent being fomented. The economic impacts. As the war enters its fifth week, its economic effects are increasingly visible. Reports from major cities indicate that many ATMs are out of cash, not functioning, or physically inaccessible, while online banking services for several major banks, including Bank Melli, are periodically disrupted. Government employees have told Iran International that salaries and benefits for large segments of workers have not been paid regularly over the past 3 months. In February, before the outbreak of the ongoing war, above average inflation for basic necessities reached triple digits, estimated between 105 and 115%. So, this is, you can see that the cracks are beginning to form within the Iranian regime. And there is a split between the IRGC and the bureaucracy. And once the blame game starts, there's no coming back from that. It's just that Pezeshkian is not strong enough to get the IRGC to do his bidding or to see any semblance of reasoning. And I fear that there is nobody left within the country that is capable of doing that. So the United States and the Israelis are going to continue to take out the hardliners within the IRGC and the Basij until such time as there is nobody to replace them and some semblance of a neutral government is going to come into play. So I want to thank you for spending time with us. We look forward to seeing you in the next episode. And please remember to like, share and subscribe, as it helps us with the algorithm and it helps our channel to grow.